There's this phrase people often throw around, just go with the flow. But have you ever thought about what it actually means? Because it seems like it can be interpreted however you want, depending on the situation. For some people, it's just not giving a shit, others associate it with apathy and lack of ambition. And unfortunately, because of that, people often throw this advice aside or actively oppose it. You can sometimes hear people saying that they are not going to go with the flow because they don't want to be like everyone else and that they're going to succeed at any cost. But in both approaches, people unfortunately miss the actual meaning, along with what they can learn from it. But first, when did we ever get this idea of going with the flow? While the exact source of the phrase isn't known, in some cases I saw it being attributed to Marcus Aurelius, but even then people aren't sure of it. But I would argue that we should attribute it to Taoism instead. This Eastern philosophy encouraged concepts like following the current or the natural flow of things much earlier than anything we see in Western culture. And even if you consider ancient Greece, Taoism and Eastern philosophy is still something that developed completely separately and goes much more in depth into this concept of flow. It also happens to be full of lessons that have been very helpful in my daily life. I would say you can currently consider it probably my favorite philosophy, or at least it's the one that's resonating the most so far. Now, I would assume most people probably heard about this philosophy of Taoism, but for many people, it probably ends on just going with the flow, or maybe they've heard this phrase Wu Wei. That's also something that I'm about to explain. Because to understand both concepts, you have to first understand what does Taoism even mean? What is it? So, Taoism is a Chinese philosophy that appeared around 450 and 300 BCE. Around that time, two fundamental texts were produced, the Tao Te Ching and Shuangzi. I hope I'm pronouncing both correctly, but we'll see in the comments. And the philosophy itself preaches living in harmony with the Tao. And Tao is this weird, undescribable truth of how the world operates. It's a very ethereal concept. It's hard to describe, so I don't want to go too much in depth. It's said that it even is impossible to describe because the real Tao cannot be simplified into words. There is a lot said about the limitations of words and how our reality is just a reflection of the true concepts and that we cannot describe in words. So whenever we mention Tao, it's not the true Tao, it's just the simplified version that we can describe. I know it sounds very confusing, so that's why we are not getting into it. For the purposes of this video, think of it as the flow of the universe. So like a natural way of things. And this is where we get to the principle of flow. And one of the core virtues of Taoism, effortless action. This is what you could have encountered under the name of Wu Wei. But let's first discuss where people often stray from this idea and how they misinterpret this quote of going with the flow. Interpretation. Well, yeah, you know what I mean. So, what people get wrong about going with the flow. In America, this phrase exploded in the 1960s, but unfortunately it seems to have spread without the underlying Taoistic principles. People use it to avoid difficult decisions. They say, I'm just going with the flow, and they push consequences of their actions into the future. They're just using it to ignore the problems that they're currently having. In other scenarios, something closer to the actual definition, it can mean just being chill out and not worrying. It's not exactly a wrong idea, but it doesn't get it right either. And the online Cambridge dictionary interprets it in yet another way. And I was very surprised when I encountered it. I'm going to read it now. Go with the flow, to do what other people are doing or to agree with other people because it is the easiest thing to do. Now I see why it can be interpreted this way, but it's definitely not what the Taoist principles preaches. I never knew it's possible to disagree with a dictionary definition, but this time I definitely do. The closest we get to the Taoistic roots of this phrase, whenever we use it in our daily lives, is by using it when we are calmly circumventing unforeseen obstacles. So whenever your plans don't go exactly as planned, whenever a train is very late, or maybe you missed the plane and you couldn't have influenced it and it just happened, then you just go with the flow and figure the situation out along the way without spiraling into a panic. But enough of that. You probably want to know now, what is it that all of these approaches are missing? And the core idea of going with the flow is effortless action, what we mentioned earlier. In the space between putting in the effort and not doing anything at all exists effortless action, also known as Wu Wei. It's the state where things come to you easily, where the goals stop mattering, and you can be both relaxed and active at the same time. It's like teaching someone to split wood and telling them to go along with the grain. Don't go against the grain. it doesn't mean that you should stop caring. I would argue it's quite the opposite. You should focus on the task and do it in a way that follows the natural way of things. So whenever you're splitting wood, you want to go along with the grain. Don't do any unnecessary work. Don't try to force it. Just be adaptable. Just make your actions fit the circumstances. And that's where the work is both the easiest and the most effective. That's what I think it really means to go with the flow. There's this cool quote from Lao Tzu. He's the author of the Tao Te Ching, or the Tao Te Ching, however you say it. The quote goes, "Water is fluid, soft, and unyielding, but water will wear away rock, which is rigid and cannot yield. As a rule, whatever is fluid, soft, and unyielding will overcome whatever is rigid and hard. This is another paradox. What is soft is strong." Now, this quote compares the approach to water. So, this point of being both fluid and unyielding is worth emphasizing. As I mentioned, it's not about not acting at all. So, there is this part of being unyielding, but there is also this part of being very fluid, adaptable, and sort of patiently working through things. So, stay adaptable. Don't stubbornly attach yourself to goals and achievements. And I would add to that to focus on moving in the right direction rather than being attached to the goal. Because whatever your goal is, it's very likely that it's going to change in the next couple of years. Or maybe you're going to encounter some incredible opportunities that go in a slightly different direction. And then you can completely miss out on them because you're stubbornly attached to the goal. And you're forcefully trying to go against the grain and against the flow, and it never actually goes right. Actually, Taoists believe that going against the flow is impossible. They believe that the world governs itself, and this is also why effortless action works, because you're going along with how the world governs itself. But trying to forcefully go against the flow, against the natural way of things, is supposedly, like, I'm not sure if I actually believe it, I would have to think about it more. But they say that it's supposedly impossible and that trying to do it will result in incredible consequences, or at least in great frustration. So instead, maybe just try to focus on removing obstacles. You already know what is healthy and what is unhealthy to you. So if you remove everything that holds you back, I believe that it will be much easier to naturally flow into the right direction, whatever the right direction happens to be. Now, once again, it's not about being completely aimless, it's about being adaptable. So you still have a certain direction that you're going towards, but you're not stubbornly attached towards the end of this path. You can flow around things, you can adapt to the situation, and eventually you're still moving forwards. So, how does it look like in practice? In the essay, I put a picture of a cat because I think they represent this idea of flow really well. I've even read a book that was titled A Monk Who Loved Cats, and it was about Buddhist philosophy, but both are closely related. And it mentioned how cats are great at existing in a present moment, which connects to this idea of flow, of being adaptable, of not being attached to a certain goal. You get the idea. So Taoism in practice is this part where we get to my personal story and my personal experiences with this philosophy and how I've incorporated it during really difficult times in my life and even how I'm still using it today. So I used to be obsessed with my goals. Whenever there was something I wanted to achieve, I ended up fixating on it so much that it was the only thing I could ever think about. Since forever I wanted to build a successful business, but by obsessing over the dream outcome, like the nice apartment, the money to travel, living in luxury, everything I could ever wish for, and so on, I was only adding more stress to what I was doing. There was this pressure of achievement. And that's the core problem. I was rigid and stubborn. I had a very specific, narrow view of what I wanted to achieve, and no other outcome was acceptable. And as a result, I was constantly frustrated and obsessed with every single detail. Because what if something goes wrong? If anything isn't exactly as I planned, then I might stray from the path and not reach my goal. I was constantly tweaking little unimportant things like, is the landing page looking perfect? Did I write the email most likely to get a response? How quickly do I need to achieve my milestones to stick to my imaginary timeline? And all of that was also happening while I was going through a quite difficult time in my life. I was trying to finish college. I was trying to find a job as a graphic designer, which proved really difficult. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life in general, because my personal passion project was also not going great. I was trying to find a way to move out of my parents' house, because my older brother already managed to do it, many years earlier. But I was still comparing myself to, someone who was years ahead of me. And there were also some other emotional, more personal struggles that I was going through. and constantly bashing my head against the wall, trying to do the same things, still trying to apply to the same jobs, and still trying to make some freelance work, still trying to build a business. Like, it wasn't working. And since I was desperately trying to figure out some way of this difficult position, I was constantly searching for new answers. It even got to the point that I was considering starting a whole another career, like going to another college and learning from zero computer science. So through that, I eventually started opening myself up to other possibilities. And while back then it was torture, it also was a point, like a starting point of me learning how to become adaptable. And now I think being adaptable is one of the most important skills I can have. So I gave up my personal projects for a while. I started applying to other jobs, not only graphic design jobs, mostly marketing since it was closely related and I already, as I mentioned, had some interest in business. And eventually I ended up getting 3 different offers. And surprisingly enough, I took the lowest paid one. Now, why did I do that? It was a quite unique proposition for an internship where I would be very involved in some meaningful activities, not just pushing papers around. And I knew it would open up some interesting possibilities in the future. I wasn't yet sure what those possibilities would be, but I knew it was worth trying out. I was still young, I had plenty of time to consider something different if it didn't work out. But you can see that I was finally noticing opportunities outside of my preconceived path, though I've still had plenty to learn. It wasn't a point where I finally managed to figure out or where I even knew that I was moving towards this Taoist philosophy. I still made plenty mistakes later. But slowly from that point, life started straightening out a bit. I moved to a small 24 meter squared apartment, but now I was appreciating it instead of fixating over my dream living space. Because this apartment is far from my perfect place, but it kind of became a perfect place. Like, I've got a really comfortable deal because this apartment actually belongs to my family member. And even though you can find some empty beer cans on the stairs, even though it's like a very, very old building, and there are plenty of things I could complain about, I'm very thankful for having the opportunity to live here. And honestly, comparatively, it's such an amazing opportunity that most people in the world don't get. But really, I feel it would be arrogant to expect anything more than that. I even met really cool people at work, so the choice ended up being very worth it. And the career also started developing into some amazing opportunities. I even started working on some side projects again. And it was clearly my weak point since I've immediately noticed that my bad habits were surfacing again. Like the fixation, the obsession, worrying over what my life is going to look like, how the side project is going to develop, all of that kinds of stuff. But now I've learned how to recognize the problem and I've started working on it and changing my approach towards life. And now this brought me here in front of this camera and this laptop, writing this essay and recording the YouTube video. Now well aware that my goals, if ever achieved, are years into the future. If I'm ever going to have something out of this, or if I'm ever going to write a book, it's like at least a 5-year journey. And I know that before I even reach this point, so many things can change in my life that there's no point in getting fixated or attached to what kind of book I'm going to write, what's going to become of this YouTube channel, what's going to become of my newsletter. I'm just focusing on the fact that I'm moving towards the right direction. I'm appreciating the growth this gives me, like the books I've uncovered because of this, the fluency in English I've achieved, so many stories that I've discovered and healthy habits that I've implemented. And most importantly, I'm creating something that I believe in. And if anything about all of these changes, I'm hoping I can still stay adaptable like water, acting in accordance with opportunities that present themselves, letting go of attachment, doubt, and anxieties that impede my flow. Thanks for listening if you've actually managed to reach the end of this video. The article I was reading and discussing that you've seen on the screen is actually on my Substack. You can click the link in the description where you can join for my newsletter issues and the archive of past essays. And you can also follow the channel if you want. But that's it for today, so see you guys next time.